She's waiting for a pause.
Yeah, I'm hearing some noise in the background.
They just started cutting the lawn next door.
Oh, okay. That'll go away in a minute then. No problem. This is Autoline After Hours with John McElroy and Gary Vasilash, episode 520 for August 6th of 2020. In the beginning, there was Genesis. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. And by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Mr. V, how you be?
Good. How you doing, John?
I'm not doing half bad, really. You know, it's always fun to do this show. I always look forward to it.
And, you know, in a normal year, you and I'd be up in Traverse City for the management briefing seminar, but not this year.
Not this year. No, it was, I'd watch it on my laptop this year.
Yeah. Strange thing.
Yeah.
So speaking of years, something happened today in 1980, which was rather interesting. And I'm sure that this will bring back fond memories for you. The first K car was produced at the Jefferson Assembly Plant in Detroit.
I was there. I was there.
Reliant. See, I knew that you'd.
Not only was I there, Lee Iacocca and then governor of the state of Michigan, William G. Milliken, were in the car. And they got in and it rolled to the end of the line. And Lee was supposed to drive it off. It would not start.
Wow. I had no idea that happened. All right.
And I mean, there was thousands of people there. This was the big moment. This was the K car that was going to save Chrysler, and it would not start.
So there's another thing that happened, and this would be in 1991 that's sort of related. On this day in 1991, Peugeot announced they were pulling the plug on America. They were done. So now we have the situation where the K car and Peugeot may be coming together as the two companies combine.
They may. And, you know, in the second half of the show, when we talk about some of the news, there's a little wrinkle in the situation there with GM's lawsuit or potential lawsuit. But we'll get into that later in the show.
Right. So that's the historical stuff for the show. So moving right along, we should introduce our colleague, Keith Naughton. Bloomberg.
Hello there, Keith.
Hi, John. Hi, Gary. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing just fine. Thank you.
Great.
Keith, you cover the Ford beat, and you must have been busy this week.
I was. I had a very busy Tuesday in particular when they made the news of the ascension of Jim Farley and the retirement of Jim Hackett. So the Jim and Jim show is coming to a close.
Yeah. And we'll get into more of that in the second half of the show, too, because there's a lot to talk about there, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
But let's bring in our special guest for today's show, and that's Mark Del Rosso, who runs Genesis North America. And Mark, what a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having Genesis on the show. It's a privilege to be here. It's great to see everyone. Thank you. And welcome to my home, by the way.
Thanks for inviting us in.
You're always invited.
Mark, you've got a tremendous amount of experience in the industry with time spent at Toyota, at Bentley, at Audi, where you were president of Audi of America. I got to believe that's why it's Mr. Munoz who tapped you on the shoulder and said, hey, I need some help over here with Genesis. And run us through that a little bit. It seems like this thing did not get off to a good start on the retail side of the operations. If I've got this right, and you straighten me out here, at first it was like, oh, any Hyundai dealer can have it. And then they decided, no, you got to have standalone showrooms. And then a bunch of dealers dropped out and sales crashed. Now it seems to be coming together, but run us through that little history and where you stand right now.
Yeah, first and foremost, I believe every morning at Genesis is just like Christmas morning, and I'm grateful to Jose and William Lee for bringing me into the company, no doubt about it. And when you look at the past, I really have to pivot to the future, and that's really what brought me to Genesis. When you look at what the company has accomplished in such a short period of time, clearly now we are the company and brand to watch. We are the desired smart choice for excellence within the luxury sector. And I'm certainly proud by the proof points of JD Power, IQS, Vehicle Dependability Study, the only brand to achieve top safety pick plus by the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety. Again, there's so much opportunity at Genesis. I don't sleep very much because I'm so excited to start my work day and work evening at Genesis. And I share that enthusiasm, I have to say. When you look at the colleagues that are in Korea, I've never met a more hardworking, passionate group of people globally from Genesis that truly believe that Genesis will be a dominant benchmark luxury brand for the world. Our talented designers, our engineers, etc. And quite frankly, you brought up the dealer body as well. The dealers have clearly recognized our tremendous investment in the brand and the product, etc. And they want to definitely invest in the brand as well and deliver that world-class customer experience in communities all over the United States and within North America. So I apologize, I really can't contain my enthusiasm, as you can very much see.
Mark, let me ask you a simple question. What is Genesis?
Well, that's a bit pointed, and hopefully I can answer it correctly. We are the luxury brand for the Hyundai Motor Company. We are clearly positioning ourselves as being a benchmark brand. Being only 5 years young, we don't have that legacy or history, so we approach everything with this unbridled enthusiasm, fused with a lot of sense of youth and wonder in everything that we do. We want to disrupt, and we clearly have the benchmark products in order to do that. We're not slowing our investment. Our product portfolio will continue to expand. By 2021, we'll have 6 model lines, G70, G80, G90, of course, GV80, as we've announced, another SUV and a dedicated BEV product, all by 2021. So Genesis is a global luxury brand that absolutely has a bright future in front of it.
Hey, Mark, you mentioned the GV80. You guys just delayed that because of COVID-19. The luxury segment, like the mainstream segment, has completely flipped to SUVs. Porsche now sells more SUVs than they do sports cars. How badly do you need that vehicle, and how much of a setback is this?
Yeah, Keith, I have to say I've never been more enthusiastic about selling a vehicle in my career in 30 years. Candidly, I have to credit the company absolutely for building the foundation right with G70, G80, and G90. And we are absolutely positioned with GV80 to win. In fact, we currently have over 15,000 customer reservations for GV80. So to be able to complement already our sedan portfolio with an SUV into the heart of the market, we believe we're beautifully positioned. And just to talk about the sedans for a moment, the 3 segments that we compete in for G70, G80, and G90, we're actually up in share through June in all 3 of those segments. And they are the 3 segments that are hardest hit in the industry. So we've got the portfolio absolutely right from a sedan point of view. G90 as another proof point, and as an example, G90, the segment is down. The segment's down 30%. We're up 16% and gaining share. So having the GV80 now come in and complement the portfolio with a really, we believe, a benchmark flagship SUV. Again, I can't contain my enthusiasm. I had the privilege of driving one in Los Angeles, and I've never seen more people turn around to take a look. It's fantastic.
So when will that be available for the consumer market?
Yeah, so we just sent out a communication that will begin customer deliveries in the fall of this year, calendar year 2020. And we're just super enthusiastic to begin to put them into communities all over North America.
Mark, we got a question here from one of our viewers, Matthew Gamsick. He points out, Lexus has got F Sport, BMW's got M, Mercedes AMG. What do you think about doing high performance versions of your vehicles?
Well, Matthew, thank you for the question. I have to say, I'm also a high performance fan. I love cars. I own some cars, and there's nothing more exhilarating than performance. I would say at Genesis, anything is possible. Again, going back to maybe what I started at the top of the show, I've never met in my entire career a more dedicated and passionate group of people at Genesis worldwide. When you really look at our designers, the design team is absolutely fundamentally fantastic and hardworking. The engineering, development, et cetera, research, really doing a tremendous job bringing products into the market. And if you really look at getting the foundation right with the sedans, now complementing with GV80, we have another SUV coming and then a dedicated BEV product. The story will continue to unfold, and I think anything is possible. As I said, when you wake up and every morning's Christmas morning, you're definitely going to get something cool under the tree.
Hey, Mark, one of your alma maters, Audi, just cut the price of its e-tron SUV by almost $9,000. No one seems to be able to penetrate the BEV market like Tesla has. What will it take to beat Tesla, and what will be special about your battery electric vehicle that will allow you to do that?
Well, you definitely have to credit Tesla, no doubt about it. I mean, absolutely tremendous within the marketplace and really beyond disruptor. I think it's definitely evidence, though, that people do want to buy BEV products. And that's a fundamental piece that I definitely want to get across. When I think about what does success look like, of course, range, of course, performance, et cetera. But I also believe when we think about luxury, it goes beyond the product. It also goes to the experience. And I really want to stick on the experience for a moment. At Genesis, we want to make sure that our customers get to experience luxury on their terms. To us, luxury is very, very personal. So being able to deliver an experience with a tremendous BEV product, I think that the future is absolutely secured. So we want to get the product right, and we absolutely will, and that's a proof point for sure. But we also want to be able to deliver an experience that is second to none within the luxury category.
You mentioned
Mark,
range. The Audi's been knocked for only having about 200 miles of range with the e-tron. Will you have 300 with yours?
A little too early maybe to talk about that, quite candidly, and not to dodge the question by any means, but please stay tuned. I have all the confidence in the world in our engineering side. They're really a tremendous group of people. And as I said, for me, the great thing and the great lure to come to Genesis was there's nothing impossible. Everything is possible. And we really pride ourselves on making impossible extinct and really igniting a sense of exploration within not only the company, within consumers, and then touching it up with some youth and wonder and having a lot of fun doing it.
Mark, later today. Sorry, go ahead, Gary.
I was going to say at the 2019 New York show, Genesis showed the Mint concept, which was an urban EV. Is this still something that you guys are thinking about, or does it go more to the crossover segment of the market?
The best way I can answer that quite candidly is if you look at Mint, you look at Essentia, I mean, there were dynamite products within and concept vehicles within the categories. And quite frankly, we continue to do feasibility studies on does the product make sense from a global perspective and also within the North American market. So I think, again, at Genesis, anything is possible, and we absolutely will maintain that we are a customer-driven company. So if our customers require something and they want to dream or they desire something from a luxury category, again, stay tuned. We're just getting started. We're a 5-year young company.
But we're going to keep pressing you on this anyway, because
sure.
as you know, later this evening, Cadillac's going to unveil the Lyriq, the first of its all electric. Well, yeah, first of its all electrics. And, Cadillac says it's going to become an all electric brand. Now, I mean, they're going to transition into this, obviously. And so we've got a question from Scott from Asheville, and I'm sort of condensing it all here, but
Sure.
do you ever see Genesis going all electric?
It really depends on the customers. And again, being a customer-driven company, if the market is going to move that way, we want to definitely be with the customers and make sure that we're answering every single demand, every single requirement that they're having. Clearly, there is a shift to BEV products, and we want to answer that shift to BEV products. While we love our internal combustion engine vehicles, and they're doing tremendous within the marketplace, evidenced by the comments I made earlier, if the market moves that direction, I really believe from a Hyundai overall company perspective, we absolutely have the competence, we have the passion, we have the drive, we have the engineering. Anything is possible, but we want to be first and foremost a customer company.
Well, Mark, I got to believe that you're bringing a different set of eyes, because the three sedans you've got, everybody agrees they're terrific.
Thanks, John.
But, you know, sedans, they're like bell-bottom blue jeans and leisure suits. You know, most people don't want them anymore. And your concept cars, as Gary pointed out, the Mint, and you mentioned the Essentia, you got a two-seater city car and a two-door coupe. Same problem. I bet they're terrific cars, but same issue. I got to believe you're bringing a sense of, let's go where we can really make some money.
Well, I think first and foremost, going back to, I wouldn't necessarily, John, say that no one wants the sedans. As I said earlier, we're actually in the three sedan segments that are down. We're gaining and earning customers, and evidenced by our market share. Also, just a point, athletic elegance, which is our design ethos, which is first visible in the G90, again, up 16% when the segment's down 30%. So the world is really recognizing the design and the beauty of athletic elegance. So to come back to your comment, looking at it through a different lens, or many lenses for that matter, and being in automotive 56 years, I'm 56 years young, the reality is we definitely need to make sure we're looking at where is the customer interest most of all when we position our entire portfolio for the future, BEV or internal combustion engine, et cetera. And this is where I think the might and the ability and the vertical of the Hyundai Motor Group really allows us to dream that the impossible is actually possible. So this is what gives me so much confidence and absolutely so much enthusiasm. I can't wait to see where Genesis is 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I believe it's going to be one of the greatest luxury stories the world has ever seen.
Mark, can you tell us how the COVID-19 crisis has affected the luxury segment in general, and Genesis specifically? Obviously, you've delayed 2 models, but what else?
Yeah, Keith, I think it's really the COVID pandemic, and I hope everyone is safe and well and making it through that first and foremost from a human point of view. But, clearly consumer behavior has changed, and I think it's really sped up the necessity to do business with customers on their terms. As I said, Genesis, we believe that luxury is personal, and we want our customers to experience luxury on their terms. So just as an example, we have a complimentary suite of services I think you're all very well aware of. So complimentary 3-year maintenance, complimentary 3 years connect, roadside assistance. We have service valet as well, which over 85% of our customers take advantage of. We instituted as another element through the crisis what's known as sales valet. So our dealers, again, being great dealers and trying to take care of their customers within communities throughout North America, instituted what's known as sales valet. I'm also very, very proud. 96% of the dealers in the United States have now adopted a digital retailing solution in order to be able to transact as well over the online capabilities. So for us, it really makes us believe that we're on the right track. And from a DNA point of view, being there for the customer and doing business on the customer's terms is absolutely important. The other piece I think is very much on the umbrella side of the equation is all companies, including Genesis, and I'm so proud of the entire team, we are very nimble, we're very adaptable, we're very flexible, but we're after what's important to the customer. So I think through the challenge of the crisis came a number of outstanding opportunities, and those companies that will be flexible and adaptable and focus on the customer, I think will absolutely win, and we are definitely going to be one of those companies.
Mark, are there attributes that signify luxury in today's market that perhaps didn't 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. As you know, I've been in the luxury market quite a bit in my life. And there are certain absolute tenets of luxury: craftsmanship, materials, scarcity, authenticity, etc. The one, though, that I think has really pivoted to the top of the basket is seamless ecosystem and the ecosystem that surrounds the product. You know, I think years and years ago, it was all about the shiny, bright object, and everyone, you know, you get all fancy and you buy the shiny object and it sits in the corner and maybe you just admire it. You know, that's definitely evolved over time. You know, people want to definitely know about the company. They want to know about the materials, the sourcing, et cetera. But what's really come into play, I think, in my opinion and our company's opinion, is this idea of seamless ecosystem. And this is where I think we're absolutely perfectly positioned, coming back to the statement and the comment where we really believe from a Genesis perspective, luxury is personal. And we want our customers to experience luxury on their terms. So when we talk about the complementary suite of services and then being able to do business with our customers on their terms, whether it's digitally, service valet, sales valet, I really believe that that is adding customer value. And that's what's so unique about Genesis. We're looking at everything and trying to add customer value versus just adding things for the sake of adding them. So seamless ecosystem is really, I think, the big key.
Well, along those lines, what are your thoughts about subscription services? A number of brands have made a run at it. Some have failed miserably. Others are still trying. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts are quite candidly going back to customers. Quite candidly, so there are a segment of customers that believe in subscription. They want to go through different vehicles at different times and have different solutions made available to them. I think this is definitely the era that a lot of companies take the lead from Genesis and really plug into what do customers want. So from whether it's subscription or ownership, et cetera, what we have to do as a company, as a brand, et cetera, is to be able to offer the customer choice and flexibility. And I believe we're beautifully positioned. Being a young company, you get to try and test and learn. And I have to really credit our dealers as well. They're an enthusiastic bunch, that's for sure. And they really want to win in their communities within North America. So I feel like it's absolutely something that if the customer demands it, we have to figure out what the solution is. So again, anything is possible at Genesis.
Hey, Mark, a moment ago, you mentioned that Tesla has helped create interest in electric vehicles. 9 out of 10 electric vehicles sold in America is a Tesla, and they are the world's most valued auto company, blowing past Volkswagen and Toyota. What is it that they're doing right that the rest of the legacy automakers aren't?
To be very direct, they don't behave as a legacy automaker. I really have to credit the entire organization, Elon Musk, the entire group of people that work at and really believe in Tesla. What they're doing, I think, is quite fascinating from a disruption point of view. Again, going back to creating this brand, this mystique, et cetera, similar to what we're doing at Genesis. We're creating a brand, we're creating a mystique. Luxury is about desire. And for me and for the team at Genesis, we keep pivoting back to the holy grail in luxury is not how much it costs, but when can I get one? And I think that's the unique proposition that we're seeing, and being able to capitalize on a shift in a marketplace, clearly from a sustainability, from a global warming, from, again, going back to what I believe customers want today. They want to know about the company. They want to know the purpose. They want to know why. They want to know what the company really values. And from a BEV point of view, clearly the movement is absolutely the right move to make. And we want to be there, and we will be there by 2021 with our first BEV product as well. So disruption, continuing to anticipate customer needs and desires, and really to create that absolute magic within the marketplace. Consider Genesis definitely on that leaderboard, if not at the top.
Sure, and you know, that's the question. You're a luxury expert. Are people buying an electric vehicle when they buy a Tesla, or are they buying a Tesla? Is it about the brand, or is it about the propulsion system?
I believe it's about both, and I'm not trying to, stand in the middle of the street. I believe it's about both. First of all, again, people part with their hard-earned money at Genesis, and we're earning the customer's business by buying the brand. I think the product is really the proof point. And then the product really validates their purchase when we think about branding overall. When I think about our products as well, it's absolutely true. And I think when you look at what people are looking at in the future, there is this higher awareness. What am I driving? What does it say about me, et cetera? From a luxury, it's an accessory. If I can be as bold as to say that. So it's a statement piece. And, when you look at G90, you look at G70, a GV80 coming into the market, all new G80 coming into the market as well. We believe, again, the people are buying the brand and what the brand stands for. And then the product is definitely the proof point.
One of the things why Tesla stock is so valued as it is its digital capabilities. It can collect so much data in its cars. It can do over-the-air updates. It can sell services in full self-driving for $8,000 kind of a thing. What are Genesis's plans in terms of being able to do all this data mining and digitization and monetization of that?
Yeah, I absolutely go back to, John, what I said maybe during the show a little bit ago. I think from an engineering, from a research, from a customer first perspective, I really believe in the Hyundai Motor Group. To me, again, when I came to the group, I was absolutely blown away by the capability of the entire company on a global basis. So whether it's digital, over-the-air updates, et cetera, the competence that the company demonstrates throughout not only the automotive sector, but within all of the business, clearly points us in a direction. If it is something that is good for the customer and cuts down on their inconvenience and adds customer value, you can count on Genesis as being a leader.
That's great. Mark, with that, I think we're going to have to wrap up this segment, but it's been great having you on here, getting a look at where Genesis is going. Because we've driven the cars. The cars are fantastic. So I can't wait to see, as you broaden the lineup, what else you're going to bring out.
Well, I really appreciate it. As I'll leave you with, I've been with the company now almost a year, and I still feel every morning like every morning is Christmas morning. And there's so much opportunity. So we are definitely at Genesis, the brand to watch. It's a privilege to be on the show. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Keith. And of course, thank you, John. Thanks for having Genesis today.
Sure. We'll have you back on again at another point.
I'd love that. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. Right now, we're going to take a quick break and give a shout out to our good friends at Borg Warner.
The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. No matter what the mode of transportation, there is always the need for an efficient propulsion system. And that's exactly what Borg Warner has been doing since the earliest days of the automotive industry. We create innovative mobility technologies that reduce energy consumption and emissions while improving performance. Our proven track record has made us an industry leader in forward-looking propulsion solutions for combustion, hybrid, and electric vehicles.
All right, we're back talking all things automotive. I was serious when I said that. I mean, I've driven everything in the Genesis lineup, and it's really good stuff. So I got to believe that if product is king, that's going to help pull them out of the hole that they were in.
It's also a lot for the money too. Good price.
Right.
Yeah, I just wonder whether there will be a generational move such that new companies like Genesis will become more appealing to a greater number of people that are coming into the luxury end of the marketplace, and they will look at companies that are traditional ones and say, I'm not so sure about this.
Yeah, the market's driven by fashion and style and having the latest, newest stuff. And having legacy brands may not count as much as they have in the last decade.
So to your point about Cadillac, I wonder whether, they're saying that they'll become the leader in electrification is part of their strategy to appeal to some of these younger people.
Absolutely.
And Cadillac has struggled with electrification, as we know. I just wonder, what it will take for any of these luxury companies to catch up with what Tesla's doing and where Tesla's heading, because no one seems to be able to sell a BEV luxury car or mainstream car for that matter successfully yet.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's some sales numbers in Europe that are starting to look better for the e-tron and the I-Pace, for example. But it's still not enough for those companies to really make a profit off those vehicles.
No.
Yeah, and I wonder to the extent to which part of that is really being pushed by those companies in a way that we don't see. I mean, we don't see Tesla ads, for goodness sakes, in this country, and
they don't run them.
Right, and so they're doing as well as they're doing without it. And I just wonder if those numbers that we're seeing in Europe are not predicated in part on lots of e-tron ads, lots of EQ ads, lots of Volvo ads, and so on, and that people are more aware of it, whereas Tesla is sort of a phenomenon. Word of mouth.
I think the question boils down to, is the future of the luxury segment electric, or is the future of the luxury segment SUV? If you're a legacy automaker, you're hoping SUV because you sure know how to sell those. If you're not, you're in trouble unless you're Tesla.
Yeah. Well, look, to your point, Keith, nobody has brought out a competitive electric car with Tesla. Not really. I mean, other automakers will tell you that. I think the first serious competitor that Tesla is going to face is the Mustang Mach-E. If GM delivers on some of the things that it's talking about with its electrics, they should be competitive. That doesn't mean they're going to sell well. I'm just saying that from a technical standpoint, it looks like they're going to be competitive with Tesla. But whether the brand image is competitive is another story altogether.
Right. And to me, it seems like the killer app is an electric SUV or an electric crossover, which is what Ford is trying to get at with the Mach-E. But there was just a teardown done on the Model Y, and it's considered the best in the lineup at Tesla. So, everybody seems to be playing catch up to Tesla at the moment in the luxury segment.
Yeah.
All right. So we've mentioned Ford 2 or 3 times. Keith, fill us in on what happened this week. Pretend that people don't know what happened at all.
Sure. Well, there was, as always with Ford, palace intrigue at the beginning of the year when we had the co-presidents of Joe Henricks and Jim Farley in a bake-off, and Farley won that bake-off, and Henricks retired. And so from then on, we knew who the anointed successor was to Jim Hackett. Jim Hackett has never really won over Wall Street to begin with, and others for that matter. And so the only thing that seemed unusual about this transition that happened this week on Tuesday, when Hackett said he's retiring on October 1st and Jim Farley will become CEO, was the timing. We all knew it was coming. We didn't think it would come during a vacation month. It didn't seem likely. These are the dog days of summer. This is not when you change leadership. It seemed more like maybe we'll get that new redesigned F-150 launched and the Mach-E launched, and actually the Bronco launched, not the Bronco Sport, but the 2-door, 4-door Bronco that's going to be built at Michigan Assembly. And that would suggest he would have retired around his 66th birthday, which comes next April. But he didn't. He retired now. They had better than expected second quarter earnings. This Bronco introduction has gone fantastic. So I think he saw an opening to leave on something of a high note. I mean, they did just lose money and have lost money for the last 3 quarters, but you can blame that on coronavirus. So he saw an opening, and he got out when the getting was good, in his view. And now we enter the Farley era, which I think will be dramatically different than the Hackett era.
And let's get into that in a second, but I'm just curious. I mean, you cover Ford. You know more about Ford than anybody outside the company, as far as I'm concerned. Did you have any inkling that this was happening or about to happen, that Farley was going to get the CEO position?
I knew. I think we all knew Farley was going to get it. That it was happening now, no. Nobody saw this coming. Nobody broke this story. The company, in a very rare circumstance, were able to announce it, and that's how it came out.
So do you think that even they came to a very quick decision, or maybe Hackett came to a very quick decision? Like you said, hey, I'm getting while the getting's good.
Absolutely. From what people inside the company are telling me, this came together very quickly. It was not in the plans 2 weeks ago, but
wow.
But there were a number of things that were coming together well. They really did get a nice bump from the second quarter. I'm not going to call it earnings surprise, the second quarter result surprise. And my gosh, could the Bronco introduction have gone any better? It feels a little, dare I say, Tesla-like. It's gone very well. All these people, I'm sure you guys see it too, all these people I'm around who don't drive Fords, and it's hard to find those around here, I know, but are suddenly interested in them. And so, I think these two very good things, and the F-150 launch looks like it's going smoothly. These things paved the way for him, and I think he decided very quickly. The other thing, I talked to Hackett about this on Tuesday, and the other thing is he felt like Farley really performed well during the COVID crisis. Farley is the one who came up with their back to work plan, and they are already at full capacity. I was listening to Gary Johnson, their head of manufacturing, this week. They're at 98% pre-COVID capacity. So they're basically back to full capacity. And, and they're meeting demand for their most profitable products. They put emphasis on the F-150 and on the SUVs. So, Farley kind of proved himself. He got a crisis as he was walking in the door as chief operating officer, and he came through it with flying colors. So that was the other factor, according to Hackett. And he said it came to him like a bolt of lightning. It was time to go.
Why do you? You said that you expect the company to be very different under Jim Farley. What do you think some of those differences will be?
Well, it starts with personality, right? I mean, famously, Hackett was described in one magazine article as like a college professor after you took 2 bong rips. So, the guy was impenetrable when he would talk to you, and he was on a different plane. I think he's a very intelligent dude, but he had a hard time communicating. And that left the troops oftentimes not really knowing what direction to go in. So I think Farley is a very straight shooter. He's very easy to understand. He's very sharp-elbowed. And if you don't understand and keep up, you're going to be out. So I think he'll be a no-nonsense boss who will get things done. And as I wrote in my story, break a lot of china and bruise a lot of egos along the way. But maybe that's what Ford needs right now. I mean, they have been in a rut, man. And they've got all this good new product coming. So you need somebody who can make these launches come off successfully, which obviously they didn't with the Explorer last year. That was a mess. So you need these very important launches to go smoothly. It looks like they already have demand for some of these new products. So you just need to meet it. And there's, as Bob Lutz used to say, there's nothing that ails Detroit that a hit product doesn't fix. So if they can have a couple of hit products, they will have a turnaround on their hands.
Keith, but to your point of execution being so very important to Ford at this point, is Farley really the guy? I mean, it seems to me that Heinrichs would have been more well suited to making sure that it happens in a good way.
That's true. Of course, it was on Joe's watch that the Explorer launch happened. But I agree. I think Joe is excellent manufacturing guy. But you shouldn't underplay the importance of Hau Tai-Tang at Farley's side. Hau is an extremely talented executive. He's doing both product development and purchasing, and has been now for several years. Who else in this industry has ever taken those two full-time jobs and done them successfully? And he's doing them well. I mean, these new products that are coming are a result of the Hau Tai-Tang era. So, having him, and by the way, Hau worked very closely with Joe through a lot of manufacturing crises. After that supplier fire, when they had to airlift the presses to the UK, remember that story? Hau was in the thick of all of that. So having him at Farley's side will help with some of Farley's shortcomings, or the areas that he's not strong in. So I do think that's important, but still, the bench at Ford has gotten thinner. It's not as deep as it used to be. They've lost some people. They obviously lost Joe. So that's the other thing I expect Farley to do. He needs to add to his cabinet.
Don't you think, though, they went with Farley too because, look, Joe, and I totally agree, fantastic executive, really knows operations. But to your point, so does Hau. But the future of the company is not with the traditional part of it. The future is all this digital monetization, data mining, over-the-air services, over-the-air updates. And it seems to me that Farley is way better positioned to lead the company in that regard.
Well, for sure, John, that's an excellent point. And remember, before he became COO, the part that he was president of for the previous year, or just shy of a year, was this future stuff. He was strategy and technology. He's the one who did the deal with VW. So he was immersed in this future, Auto 2.0, whatever you want to call it. So he understands it. He speaks the language. So having that insight from a guy who really is actually a car guy, who races cars on weekends, who during this period when he had that strategy job that sort of took him out of the nuts and bolts of the car business, drove around in a vintage Bronco just so he could feel connected to the petrol, So he's a duality. He has both sides, but he had a very important education in that strategy job on what the future of auto should or might look like. So he should have a clear understanding of that and not get lost in it in the way that Mark Fields did, that cost him his job before the Jim Hackett era. Mark Fields got so enamored of Auto 2.0, he sort of let Auto 1.0 go to seed. So I think that Farley gets both sides of the business, the now and the future. And I think he has a good shot at pulling those off.
But couldn't one make the argument that if we look at, so in the last 10 years now, Mullally, Fields, Hackett, now Farley, and that of that group, well, let's put Farley to the side since he hasn't had the job yet, but Mullally certainly had the most positive effect on the fortunes of Ford. And he was not a car guy; he was an airplane guy.
Right.
So I sort of wonder that as Ford moves into this future, I mean, what is truly the value of some guy who races his GT and drives in a Bronco versus if they had gone and hired somebody from Facebook or something.
Right, and that's an excellent point, Gary. And Bill Ford said the other day in announcing this, the board did not look outside. They did not consider any outside candidates. They settled on their man, 6 months ago, and that's what they were going to do. I think Mullally is a once-in-a-generation CEO. He was a rock star CEO, the biggest rock star this town has seen since Lee Iacocca. He's the only Ford CEO of the last 5 who drove the stock up. And by the way, the executive chairman is among that group of 5. So Hackett drove it down more than Fields did, by the way. So the Mullally era was unique and special. It was the bankruptcy era that obviously he kept Ford out of. But he also was he was a very talented executive. And I feel, and I bet you guys agree, that there's a lot in common between where he came from, Boeing, aircraft manufacturing and the auto industry, much more than there is between Steelcase, where Jim Hackett came from, office furniture, and the auto industry. And that showed. And, I thought Hackett brought some design sensibilities from his office furniture background, but he didn't have the manufacturing and the labor and all the other stuff that Mullally had in his first day on the job. You remember that great anecdote Mullally used to tell. Some, Ford executive who probably wasn't there for very long after Mullally arrived said to him, we make cars with, 8,000 parts and that have to be safe. And he said, yeah, and I made a vehicle with 100,000 parts that if it wasn't safe, falls out of the sky. So, Mullally came in with a lot of skills that were complementary to the auto industry. And I think that gave him a running start. And he was just an excellent executive. So, I'm not sure if you went outside, you can find another Mullally, but I guess it wouldn't have been bad for the board to kick a few tires.
Yeah. Keith, here's another question. When Mullally first came in, there was a lot of questions about him inside the company because he was an unknown. What do you think the sense is inside the company now of Farley taking over the CEO role?
Yeah, I think there's a mix. I think there's a little fear and loathing because Farley can be such a taskmaster, and people worry about that and that he'll want to, shuffle the deck. So I think there's concern about, how big will the changes be that he makes and how hard will he drive the people? Because he himself, as I had in my story the other day, works like a lunatic. He brags about, getting up in the middle of the night to answer email. And he was asked by, I think it's the New York Times, what's your favorite TV show? And he said, I don't own a TV. So the guy is exceedingly driven. And if he expects everybody else to match his drive, he'll run everybody out of there. So that's a delicate balance he has to hit. It's great that he's consumed by it and he lives it. But, he has a company with almost 200,000 employees. He needs to find the right balance in how to lead them without driving them into the ground.
Will the forthcoming launches, you mentioned some of the vehicles that are coming, the Bronco, the F-150, the Mach-E. If there is a troublesome launch for any of these vehicles, and given it seems now that there's almost starting churn at Ford, will he be potentially in trouble?
Yeah, that could definitely put him on the hot seat. And that's what Wall Street is watching for. They don't believe Ford can pull it off. That's why the stock is trading at 10-year lows. They don't think after that Explorer thing and these last 3 years of kind of, lots of promises, but not a lot of delivery on things like the global redesign, they are very skeptical and they're just not buying what Ford is selling. So it goes both ways, Gary. If they screw up one of these launches, oh my God, it's going to be bad for Jim Farley, but it's going to be bad for Ford Motor Company and its shareholders. Conversely, if they do pull them off, and they are at good plants, that's an important thing. Chicago, where the Explorer was launched, is a troubled plant. It's been a troubled plant for years. It's paid tens of millions in fines for workplace problems. So it's been a troubled plant for decades. The Bronco's going off in Michigan Assembly, excellent plant. The F-150 plants, the Rouge in Kansas City, excellent plants. Mach-E's being built in Mexico. I'll let you guys tell me how good that is. But I think, they have a great shot with F-150 and Bronco to pull those off, to do well at those plants, because those are good plants.
Yeah. Hey, look, we got to take a quick commercial break. We'll come back talking about a whole bunch of other things. Gary, I know you've got some topics you'd like to get into, but first, a shout out to our good friends at Bridgestone. All right, we're back talking with Keith Naughton from Bloomberg. Keith, I'd make one other point about the Chicago plant. I think they made a terrible mistake. They gutted that plant, put in all new equipment on an all new vehicle and tried to launch all trim lines at the same time.
Yep.
Recipe for disaster, and disaster struck.
Yep, they bit off more than they could chew, and they said they'll never do that again. I think that was a component of the problems. I think there are deeper structural problems at that plant, but yeah, for sure. They had the police cruiser, they had, a hybrid, they had all sorts of stuff going down that assembly line. And that's asking even the best of plants to do too much.
Yeah. And a Lincoln version too.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Before we leave Ford, I think it's sort of interesting if we think about this for a minute, that Fields was criticized because he allegedly did not have a compelling vision of the future that made people on Wall Street feel good about the future of Ford. Yet it was hardly, and it would be difficult to talk to Mark Fields without him talking about mobility and electrification and autonomy and so on, which surprises me, because then we have Hackett, who comes in, and some referred to him as Professor Moonbeam. Not nice, but that's what they were saying, because of his presentation, and would talk up, go to CES and sit on the stage and talk about the future, and as you pointed out, I mean, the valuation, what stock went down like 40% during his tenure, which was more than Fields. Okay, so now we're having Farley come in, and so we have the world's best-selling pickup truck coming, right? We have an SUV. Which, we had Paul Wraith on the show last week, the chief designer. I mean, this thing looks sensational. And even if, someone isn't, looking at a Bronco as being an icon, I mean, they just look at this thing and, well, wow, this is a really cool vehicle. Right. I mean, it would be hard not to do well with that. I'm not so sure about the Mach-E, but so if we just take the F-150 and the Bronco, which are going to be, two strong pillars, I mean, right. These were traditional cars. This isn't the future.
No. Oh my gosh, no. These are gas burners, baby. You ask Ford about when's the electric Bronco coming, and they really have nothing to say. And I know they're going to do an electric F-150, and I think that's big and important, but it's never going to carry the water for the F-Series brand. It's just not. So yes, they are. I think what Ford is getting right first and foremost is the traditional business, which is yesterday. You're right, Gary. And I think the best thing they have going for them in the future business is Argo AI. I think they're a fantastic, autonomous vehicle company, which is why Volkswagen invested in them. But unfortunately, AVs keep getting farther and farther away, as we realize that the technological challenge is greater. Where they can really bridge the gap, Ford is, and this is not sexy, but is in commercial vehicles, because that's where we'll see autonomy first. Delivery vehicles, things that come back to a port at the end of the day, things that are easy to, well, not easy, but that are you can program them to repeat routes over and over again. They're not random like a driverless Uber. So that's where autonomy will come in first. That's where electrification could come in first from a profitable standpoint. And Ford is, as they will tell you till you're blue in the face, is a leader in commercial vehicles, and not just the F-Series, the Transit van, the Transit Connect. They really seem to have something going there. So that can finance their future. If they can get that one right and be that be the place where the intersection of tomorrow and today happens, then they can have a future. They can have something that's uniquely theirs. This is the thing I was trying to get, at with Mark Del Rosso's. Everybody's going to have an electric SUV. Everybody's going to have an electric luxury car. What is the thing that sets you apart from the leader, currently Tesla? And in Ford's case, when it comes to commercial vehicles, they are the leader. So that's an area to make money, and then you have the money to finance your future. Right now, that's the F-Series. The F-Series finances everything that Ford does. in the future, it could be commercial vehicles finances everything Ford does, which includes the F-Series as commercial vehicles. And then that can be their road to the future.
Yeah.
Not sexy, but if it makes money, they'll make them happy. And, and to the point of, you were saying commercial vehicles will be the first, John, at the top of the show, we mentioned we would be in Traverse City at the management briefing seminar, which was held virtually. And Chris Urmson, one of the founders of Aurora Innovation, who had been, the original guy at Google's self-driving car, which has morphed into Waymo since his departure, was saying yesterday during a keynote, it isn't easier to do commercial vehicles autonomously because autonomous is hard. I mean, it's just hard. Yep. And when it comes, it may likely come, in longer highway driving than, inner city sort of thing. But he said, don't expect this right away because it's just very difficult to pull off.
Yeah, the whole notion of a free-range autonomous vehicle just going wherever you program it to go, that keeps getting farther and farther away. That's why you need repeatable routes, airport shuttles and delivery vans or delivery vehicles between, hubs of a distribution system. You need that kind of, it's boring, I know, but you need that kind of repeatable action for this technology to actually come to fruition.
So speaking of Waymo and Uber and things like that, so Anthony Levandowski was sentenced to 18 months in prison and fined $756,000 and change for stealing secrets from Waymo and bringing them to his company Auto, which was a truck, oddly enough, speaking of commercial vehicles, a truck autonomous vehicle company, which was then purchased by Uber within months. And so is this just typical and he's just an example of what's going on, or is this really an outlier?
Well, the trip to the Gray Bar Hotel comes after the civil penalty, where he's been fined $159 million, which is why he had to declare bankruptcy back in, this was missed by most people because the COVID crisis was breaking, but back in the end of April. So this guy is just totally screwed. But yeah, he was one of the founding fathers of autonomy, and many of them are sprinkled everywhere. Argo AI that I mentioned a moment ago has Brian Selesky, who was also at the Google self-driving car project with Urmson and worked with him on autonomous stuff before that at Carnegie Mellon. So all of these guys are from the same club, and Levandowski just got foolish and tried to steal some Google technology and got caught. And now nobody will stand by his side. Uber, where he went to work, won't indemnify him, won't cover that $159 million. Surprise, surprise. And so now it's just, off to jail and, try and hope your bankruptcy will protect you from these fines.
Mm-hmm. But, Gary, your question's a good one. Is this typical? You hear about this a lot in Silicon Valley, or I shouldn't say a lot, but you hear about it. Somebody jumps from one company to another and they take a lot of intellectual property with them. Now, whether they walk out with cartons of stuff is one thing. Whether they walk out with ideas in their head is another. That's far more difficult to prove. But Levandowski got caught with red-handed on this stuff. In fact, he was starting his company, his new company, when he was still working at Waymo or Google, and did it on the QT, wasn't telling anybody, and started recruiting people to go with him. And if you read Larry Burns's book called Autonomy, about the very early days, which was only a decade ago or so, nobody liked Levandowski. I mean, none of them did. There was just something about his personality. He just rubbed people wrong. I've met the guy myself. I didn't quite warm up to him either. So I think that while taking ideas, in your head or walking out with cartons full of stuff is an issue in the tech industry, Anthony Levandowski was in a class by himself.
And he downloaded the stuff onto his personal computer. So it's one thing to walk out with ideas in your head. It's another thing to walk out with software on your computer that you just stole. That is easily findable.
Right. Well, speaking of lawsuits, I saw that Karma Automotive, and we had Karma on the show, I guess it was 3 or 4 months ago. We had Bob Cruz, who was at that time still with Karma, is being sued by VFL Automotive, and a founder of which is our friend Bob Lutz. And so VLF is suing Karma, saying that they shared with Karma their idea for a luxury Humvee vehicle, and that they're now asking for $18.5 million in damages to cover their costs related to developing this thing. Man, it's getting ugly out there with these companies.
Well, yeah, and let's not forget GM is suing FCA. So, it's a legitimate time.
Keith, go into a little bit more detail on that, because GM had sued them before. The judge threw the case out with prejudice, which means you can't do anything about it. Right. And you pick it up from there. GM claims it's found new evidence.
GM refiles with what can only be described as a John le Carré novel, that essentially, the UAW used its seat on the board of General Motors to steal its secrets and create, it is really like out of a spy novel, all these secret bank accounts and the Caymans and, Swiss bank accounts, all the stuff that you would see in a James Bond movie, to enrich themselves and defraud General Motors. So they are not giving up. They are pressing forward. And then Ron Gettelfinger, former president of the UAW, came out with just a flaming letter this week, just tearing GM asunder, saying that their latest lawsuit is filled with lies, and how dare they assail his character. And he, just to be clear, Gettelfinger is not part of the scandal that has rocked the UAW. He came before that, and he has remained pretty clean. So he's also remained very quiet. So he came out of the shadows and just fired a missile at General Motors.
But, some of his word choosing in his denial was interesting. And I don't have the words in front of me right now, but I'm going off the top of my head. But he said something like, I did not have control of those accounts. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a weird way of saying, I would have come out and said, I don't know nothing about these accounts. I don't know what they're talking about. But to come out and say, I did not have control of these accounts was a very interesting choice of words in my book.
And it's never good for a president to say they don't have control of anything.
So, John, what will be the consequence in terms of the FCA PSA merger? Will this cause a derailment?
Let's see what the judge says. I mean, when GM comes out and says, hey, we've got the bank accounts in the Cayman Islands and Liechtenstein and Switzerland, and I think one might have been Hong Kong. I mean, number one, I want to know who did their forensic, investigation, digging that stuff up. Man, there's just a story in that. And so to me, this is like, to your point, Keith, John le Carré kind of stuff. I want to keep turning the page on this. So if the judge goes, yowza, okay, maybe there is more to this than I thought before, I think the PSA merger is possibly not going to happen.
It'll at least be delayed, don't you think, John?
At the very least. I mean, because look, we all know, or we all believe, I think, that Sergio was the mastermind of this whole subterfuge of what GM is accusing FCA of having done. But they're also saying, General Motors is, that the rest of the people at the top knew about this. In fact, GM is saying that FCA packed the board of FCA NV with people who were going to go along with the whole scandal. So that calls into question, how much did John Elkann, the chairman, know? How much did Mike Manley know? Did he know any of this? Who knew all these things? And all these questions are going to come to the fore if the case goes forward, to the point that I think it'll be very difficult for the PSA merger to go through.
I agree.
That would not be good.
Well, So let me throw in my next conspiracy part of this. General Motors takes control of Chrysler.
There you go. They get that Jeep brand.
They get it all.
Yes.
All right. So how is that going to happen? I want you to explain that.
Well, they financially cripple FCA with whatever settlement that they come up with, and FCA goes, "Oh my gosh, we can't survive." And whichever administration is in Washington goes, "Hey, we can't give up this American icon. General Motors, you take it over." Which, remember, was the Obama administration's task force original plan to smash Chrysler and GM together, until Sergio, stuck his hand up and said, "Hey, I'll take that thing called Chrysler for free. Why not?"
Yep. Yeah, I agree. By the way, I think their new name should be Jeep Inc. That's what they can call themselves. Not, what is the name again? Not the indecipherable.
Oh, Stellantis or something.
Yes. Yes, right. Stellantis, the deep sea city. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So what's the timing on this?
On the FCA and GM lawsuit, I think there's many chapters to go on this one, to continue with the novel metaphor. GM is not giving up, so Chrysler will fire back, and we'll see where it goes from here.
So this means that the PSA deal is pushed back further and further and further to who knows when.
Yeah,
it depends. It comes down to what the judge says, and I don't know how long it's going to take a circuit judge to say, "Okay, bring the case back in." If he brings it back in, everything downstream gets delayed. If the judge says, "No, I told you, I rejected this with prejudice," boom, it's a done story.
Unless GM appeals. And then
they can't appeal. That's it. And I didn't know this before. This is the great thing about the auto industry. We even learn about law. If a judge rejects a case with prejudice, that's it. There is no appeal. So that's why they're bringing out this evidence and going back to the judge and go, "Oh, look at this. We didn't know this when we first brought this to you. So please reconsider."
It will be interesting times.
All right, I want to ask you guys about one final topic. Okay, so the company formerly known as British Petroleum, now BP, it lost $6.7 billion in the second quarter. And they had some sort of enlightenment such that the chairman of BP came out and said, and this is a quote, "Our first judgment simply recognizes a stark truth. The world is on an unsustainable path. Its carbon budget is running out." and near as I can tell, isn't petroleum a hydrocarbon?
Mm.
So here you have this giant petroleum company basically saying they've got to do something else. They've got to shift. They've got to become, and this is their words, from an international oil company to an integrated energy company.
Mm.
Now, is this a recognition that we're at some sort of point where things have irrevocably changed, and not because of COVID, just because of the carbon situation?
Absolutely. I think it's hard to see that from our perch here in the United States, but the rest of the world is actually taking climate change seriously and regulating it accordingly. And so that is going to lead to, the death of the internal combustion engine. When that will happen, we're not sure, but it'll happen. And if you don't need gasoline anymore to power the hundreds of millions of cars on this planet, then there's not as much business left for those petroleum makers. So they better reinvent. They should be reinventing themselves as quickly as the automakers are. I was surprised to see. So BP cut its dividend in half as it was announcing this big loss. In half? So they still pay a dividend, in other words. Really? Because GM and Ford don't. So that's amazing to me. And it's the first time they've cut their dividends since the 70s. Really? Wow. So I think they have a reckoning coming.
You know, they've been talking about this for a while. I mean, that's why they changed their name from British Petroleum to just BP. They wanted the petroleum out of investors' minds. And they did this about the time that they had that massive oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. And that's when they started talking about, oh, we have to transition out of hydrocarbons into renewables or whatever. And they started putting pictures of sea turtles in their annual report and tried to do this whole greenwashing thing. Let's see if they can pull it off. I'm very skeptical of corporations transitioning from one industry to another industry. BP's an oil company. They know oil. Do they know anything about photovoltaic cells? No, not really. It's not in their DNA. Do they know hydrogen? Do they know wind? No, they don't know that stuff. So we just think, oh, oil is energy. Oh, they can just be an energy company that does other stuff. I think there's going to be startups. In fact, Tesla could even give them a run for its money. Sure. And I think it's going to be new companies that take over the new energy field. I don't have much faith in traditional oil companies making the transition to an oilless business.
Yeah, I'm trying to picture BP wind farms.
Right. Look, they know oil, and we need oil.
I was surprised to learn. I was surprised to learn, however, that they actually have the #1 preferred coffee brand in New Zealand.
Who knew?
Okay. And they themselves pointed this out. And so wild bean coffee is huge in New Zealand, and they sell it in, they serve more than 150 million cups of coffee in 12 different companies. It's just like, and they made $1 billion last year on their convenience stores.
Oh, wow.
And they're looking to double that. So suddenly, they're gonna be competing with Starbucks rather than with Shell. It seems like.
I guess you could argue that caffeine is a form of energy.
Point well taken.
I'll second that emotion. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It is for me.
Well, you raise a good issue there, Gary, because gas stations don't make their money selling gasoline. They make their money selling milk and chewing gum and cigarette lighters and things like that. And there's a keen interest in electric cars on the part of these independent franchisees, because you're not going to charge up your car in 5 minutes if you go to a public charging station. You're going to be there longer. You're going to be there with today's technology, at least a half an hour. So that's a real opportunity, so these franchisees see, of selling you more stuff, of setting up a nice little coffee bar, maybe some tables and things like that, and make their stations more like a Starbucks or a Panera Bread or something like that, rather than just, the kind of places that they are right now.
Yeah, that's a huge opportunity. They could create little diners or, a place where you can sit down and have a meal with all the time it'll take to recharge your electric car.
Good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Hey guys, I think we got to wrap it up here. But okay. Keith, great having you on. I love getting your viewpoints of all the stuff going on at Ford. What a fascinating story.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. It's such a busy week for you, and
I appreciate the offer. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, real good. And Gary, I'll see you again next week.
Okay, take care.
Okay, so long, everyone.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. And by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.